Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. I welcome everyone in this webinar, and this webinar is related to how we can publish in top tier journals. I am Dr. Ahmad Imran Hanjra, working as an assistant professor at Arid Agriculture University. I have more than a decade teaching and research experience. So our worthy guest lecturer or resource person is Professor Faridul Islam, and I'm very thankful for his time, and I'm also thankful to Madam Anam Shafiq for her logistic support to our webinar. First of all, I would like to share the brief profile of Professor Faridul Islam. Professor Faridul Islam is working as a professor of economics at Morgan State University, Baltimore, USA. And he earned his degree, undergrad degree, from University of Dhaka, Bangladesh. After that, he did his MS from London School of Economics, England. Then he earned his PhD from Illinois University, Urbana State, USA, under the supervision of Professor Paul and Anil Bera. He is working in domain of economics of environment and energy, labor and immigration, currency crisis, international trade, development economics, applied time series, econometrics, corporate finance, and monetary economics, as well as health economics. He has over the 4 decades teaching and research experience, and he has taught the courses related to forecasting, policy-related courses, as well as economics at both graduate and undergraduate levels. And he has supervised a lot of students at PhD level, and he is external examiner to evaluate PhD thesis in different countries. He is serving as a number of top tier journals as an editorial, as well as he is a reviewer of several international journals. Out of them, few are here, like Empirical Economics, Journal of Economics Education, Structural Modeling and Modeling and Change in Economic Dynamics, Journal of Asian Economics, Economic Letters, Economic Modeling, and Australian Economic Papers. He has published a lot of papers, academic papers, in well-known top-tier journals, and he has participated in different national and international universities to share his research findings. And it's the brief profile of Professor Faridul Islam. Now the session is over to our keynote speaker, and followed by question answer session. So you are welcome, warmly welcome in this session. Now it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Hanjra. It's a great pleasure to know you and be able to work with you. I did enjoy working with you. You are a very hardworking young man, and I can see you have a lot of promises to publish. But remember, the topic you have raised has haunted millions of scholars trying to publish. So for publication, you need basically 3 things. And then there are subgroups. There are many things, but I'll broadly divide it into 3 categories. 1, the idea has to be there. Number 1, that's the most important. You have to understand which topic would be appealing and try to find out something which has the undertone of a very modern version of the issue. That's number 1. And secondly, you must be a very good computer analyst and very good at digging into computer, data mining. That's the number 2 item. And number 3, you must have a very good handle on methodology. So about methodology, obviously We can do econometrics. That's the best and easiest way of doing it. And skills are important here. And when you talk about the estimation issue, there are basically three estimation techniques. One is the classical one method, OLS and maximum likelihood. Second one is called the generalized method of moments. And third one is called the bootstrapping. This is a new field and a lot of people are doing. And in each of these methods, you can use both time series and cross-section or panel data. So estimation, and whichever estimation you adopt, if the data is not good, it's not going to produce good results. Very confusing, misleading results. So make sure that you have access to the best data. That's not in your hand, remember that. So data always is a limitation, always. But the important point here is the tool, the technique that you use. These days, panel data has become an important route for writing good papers. There are many other methods emerging. This is a continuously evolving science or discipline. Research itself is a separate discipline, I would call it. So you must be familiar with the up-to-date methodologies. And in this area, as I said, panel data is often preferred because it captures both the underlying time dynamics, because time series is a dynamic process, and the cross section that comes into or brings into fore the issue of cross sectional dependence. So the tool is very rich and therefore it works really good, and it's a preferred tool for most of the people who want to do research, and it is well accepted entrenched into the literature also. So about three topics: you have to have good methodological background and ability to deal with data, and importantly, most important part, where we, the people from non-English speaking people, become victim of it, is our linguistic deficiency. Our writing style is really very poor. Please don't misunderstand me. I am also coming from the same region. I suffered a lot from this issue. My advisor Paul Newborough used to tell me, well, you have done a good job, but unless you can improve your writing skill, you will not get anywhere. And then I took a job with a forecasting firm. I worked there for a year, and I think I gained some interesting insight on the writing style. And I thought that was the best thing that I earned by my 1 year's work experience there. And then I came and became a teacher from there on. I love teaching, I love learning, and I enjoy venturing into new areas. But remember, the whole idea is be familiar with the literature, what is there, and how you can tweak it into a new topic and make it marketable and saleable both. Now, how do you make it saleable? The idea that you conceive, write it down, read it, and make sure that you are convinced that this makes sense. Actually, many of the PhD dissertations that I review, the idea is good, the methodology is very sound, but it's very hard to read it. You can never publish a paper if the writing is not getting to the point where the reader enjoys reading it. If he doesn't enjoy reading it, he will say, no, it is not worth publishing, poor exposition. And as people from outside of English speaking countries, we always will suffer this disadvantage, always. How to overcome it? Now, one thing that you need to understand and follow very well is read. If anybody has a question, you can feel free to interrupt me. I think this should be seminar kind of issue. You don't have to wait. Just pop up and say, I have a question, and raise it. I'll try to answer them to the best of my knowledge and understanding. Okay? So it's kind of informal seminar. Let me put it that way. That's why I'm not using any slide or anything like that. I'm just talking not one-to-one, from one to a group of intellectuals. And I have a very high opinion about the Pakistani scholars. They are good, very smart. Because I used to work for Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies, which was basically the precursor of that was the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, PIDE. PIDE was moved to the then East Pakistan in 1969, and that became BIDS. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I worked there for 15 years. And there, our essential job, the main job, was to collect data and do research. But in those days, I couldn't write. I would write and my boss would say, no, this is not really good. But they are nice and kind. They taught me, I learned some, not a whole lot. But after 1 year's work in the corporation, I really figured out what is the logical sequencing of sentences, what goes after what comes before what. And that's the key to writing. So it must be logical that this sentence should precede and this sentence should follow. This paragraph should come first, this should be second and third and fourth and so on and so forth. So that feature must be an endogenous process in the writer. And writing style you pick up from reading others' papers. Read top papers, okay, whether you understand or whether you implement it or not, see how they write it. In fact, some of the Pakistani people wrote so well. One of the scholars writing, I remember, he was a member of the Planning Commission of Pakistan, if I remember correctly, or a chief economist. Doctor. Anyway, I forgot the name. He wrote a book. If you read that book, Strategy of Planning. Even the English-speaking people will be impressed by the kind of writing. It's beautiful English. Or you can read the writing of A History of Second World War by Churchill. He wrote a book on history, but it was so enlightening and so well presented and articulated. He got a Nobel Prize in Literature writing that book on history. Read his book. The choice of word, the organization of them, structuring them, and you can borrow from them and put into your story, but edit a little bit so that it doesn't look like a plagiarism. Plagiarism is a serious offense, remember that. And these days it is easy to catch them because softwares quickly identify which part has been taken from where. And the worst part of this plagiarism detection is they do not distinguish between your writing and footnotes and even the references. Even the references, they think that this is plagiarism. No, it is not. This is just nonsense. But anyway, the point is writing, number one, because sometimes things just go through because it is so well presented. People are impressed by just the simple presentation. Say, let's give a chance to that. And if you have a good methodology to back your results and your conclusion, you are done. You aced it. And it is a continuous process. Never feel frustrated because some of us have failed to write very well. But this will come if you try hard. And you must work hard to get familiar with this point. Now remember one thing. Even sitting in America, I have seen many faculties, they even don't know how to write a paper. Believe me, the school where I was there before I came to Baltimore, there were 3 faculty members. They left because they refused to do research. So, as I was telling you, these guys left teaching job, tenure track job, and became lecturers because they are good teachers, but they had zero research capability. And this guy told me clearly, Fareed, I become very frustrated when a paper gets rejected. I said, this is the name of the game. You don't expect all the writings you submit automatically to get published. Plus, if the materials are insufficient, it will never get published. But if the methodology or rich methodology, if it becomes a matter of presentation, then you will get a review and resubmit. Okay? But he said, I cannot deal with this. I'm not going to teach anymore. So he became a lecturer in a big school, very well paid, but will remain lecturer for the rest of his life. They refused to learn. And even actually one of their papers came to me for review. I was a bit harsh. I said, research doesn't mean cut and paste and not edit it thoroughly. So these things, it is not a question of cut and paste. You cut and paste and then thoroughly edit it. Don't keep one single word, whatever he wrote. And therefore, it will be a new paper, and make sure it is a continuous process, sentence by sentence. Each sentence, the prior one and the subsequent one must be well linked, well connected. Then the thinking process becomes smooth. Otherwise, writings will never be easily understood by the reader. And if the reader doesn't like it, no matter how much valuable materials are in it, it's not going to pass through. No way. It's not going to do anything. So methodology, writing skill, and I call it presentation. So when you write a paper, first of all, state the problem. What's the problem you are dealing with? And why it is important. I mean, if it is not important, why anybody would read it? So you have to say the importance of the paper, the relevance of the topic in the context of your particular discipline. So, which is basically boils down to contribution. So, contribution. And then you say, this guy has done this guy has done this guy has done this, even if before you go to the literature. And people's views, basically, the dominant views are this. Sadly, an important part in this process, which is this one, has not been discussed. Neither has it been raised nor been discussed. And this intent or objective of this paper is to fill in that gap and fill in that gap in the literature. And that's what we are going to do here. So that's fine. And then your next question is how you are going to do it. So you say what others did, how they did it. This becomes a part of literature review. And then you write what you got as the result. So this is what you got. And this is the first one that produced this result. And this is, nobody else has done this. That's my contribution. So usually 3 or 4 contributions. Number one, the methodology has not been used. Nobody has looked into this country. And this country should be represented or referred, should be part of the analytical studies, and therefore I am doing this country to provide additional evidence, which is also research, original research. And then I differ with that methodology, and my results are different, distinctly different from this findings, but corroborates with this finding. So you see that you are distinctly different, and your findings also match with others. That means results have commonality with similar studies, even though they have used different methods. That means the results are appearing to be robust. So that's one thing. So describe the methodology in detail. And as you describe methodology, you have to then describe in detail the sources of data and how you are doing it. So if you are doing a survey, and that is the source of your data, then you have to completely describe how you did the survey. Where did you survey? Who were the respondents? And the data process collection, the collection of the data itself has to be described. How many people were contacted? How many of them responded, and how many of the questions had to be rejected because their quality was poor. You give a big description of all these things, because primary survey, any study based on primary survey is extremely valuable, and they get special consideration for publication. Absolutely, absolutely. Some of the studies that people do, household income and expenditure survey, they are published. Every country produces those numbers, and you can see, write a paper using that kind of data, you will be almost assured that that piece will go through, because you used almost primary data. Household income, HIES, household income and expenditure survey. That's a survey done every year, I think, in every country. Either the Bureau of Statistics or the Planning Commission or somebody else or some foreign organization does it. And if you do your survey, have competent researchers who will conduct the survey, and when they bring the question answers, responses, you review them very closely and tell them this is where you haven't done a good job, this is where you haven't done a good job, and so on and so forth. It's hard, but it will become easy over time. It has to become easy. Otherwise, nobody would be able to publish anything. So you please remember these steps very carefully, and then at the end of the paper, you have the introduction, what you are doing, why you are doing, and then how you are doing. These are the three questions you must answer. And particularly the importance of this paper is the policy implication, how it can affect or tweak the policymakers in the problem areas that have not been addressed. So you can suggest some broad policy prescriptions, but remember, your prescription of the policy shall not be coming from nowhere. Those must be related to the findings that you have, and based on that, the prescriptions must be related to your findings. So I think that is important. And then at the end, when you write the conclusion, you summarize what you did, summary of everything. What is the objective, and how did you fulfill that objective, and what you got. Don't write in detail, just summary. Summary is a summary. And then at the end, you say shortcomings of your paper, and then directions for future research. So that's those one paragraph, not a whole lot. One paragraph is very useful. And if you want to write in top journals, you must replicate or use a paper which has already been published to one of the top journals. Don't put reference to journals that are not well known, at least not in the JEL. So what is JEL? Journal of Economic Literature. And you get that in econlit.org. Econlit, this is economicliterature.org. You go there, and under that you will see journals listed under Econlit. Click that. I think there are about 4,000 journals there. A lot of journals. And make sure that the journal is published by a well-known, reputed publisher like Elsevier or Springer or whatever, These are top journals, publishers, not journals, they're publishers. And some top university journals like, American Economic Review, they are hard to understand, difficult to put a bite on it. And if you put bite on it, sometimes your teeth will break. But never be scared of that.
Yeah.
American Quarterly Journal of Economics. Then you have the Journal of Political Economy. And each of them are specialized in publishing only these kinds of works. Okay? Health and education related ones, human capital ones, they go into Journal of Political Economy. Quarterly Journal of Economics is slightly broader than that. And then there's another one called International Economic Review. That's also a very top journal. And then there is this Journal of Human Resources, Review of Economics and Statistics, Review of Economic Studies. Econometrica and Journal of Econometrics. These are some of the best known papers. And then slightly below that comes your review of applied economics. Applied Econometrics, Journal of Applied JAE, Journal of Applied Econometrics. It's still a top, but it is not on the first step. And then you have Journal of Labor Economics. That's top journal. These are subject specific. Journal of Labor Economics, and Journal of International Trade, or JIE, Journal of International Economics. That's probably one of the 15, 16. So read from there and see how they write. They are written by some of the best authors. Or economic modeling or Journal of Policy Modeling. These are also very good journals. Policy modeling, where you find work by Nobel laureate Stiglitz and others. Review of Economic Studies, you get extremely high quality papers. Then there's Oxford Bulletin of Economics, which is again a sort of younger brother of Econometrica. Okay, it's a slightly lower, but it's well received in the profession. Economic Inquiry. So these are another class of journal. But there's still, if you publish 2 or 3, your tenure in any good university will never be blocked. You will get a tenure. 3 papers of Economic Inquiry you are through. Yeah, I mean, the reason I suggest you to read, you will see mostly the structure, how they present their case, That's the most important part. You can, it's like, you know, if you look at America, you will see sometimes people talk garbage and still they get a lot of votes, right? So sometimes, you know, your case is not very strong, but your presentation is excellent and your methodology is okay. It's not the best methodology, but it's okay. And we'll not have trouble getting them through. So a combination of all methodology, writing, and the research question, they all should be combined in a very comprehensive manner that reader will be impressed. Yeah, this is a good paper, as I like it. So you have to read the mind of the reader, which one he would like. And your writing style determines largely where you can push the whole thing to. So I've been talking for about 40 minutes. And now we open the floor to general discussion and question. Any particular thing that you couldn't follow? Let's see. I'll review it.
So now the session is open for question answer. If any
sorry, can you talk to the speaker, please? I cannot hear you.
Yeah, now the session is open for question answer. If any of the participants has question, he or she can raise their hand. Like we are having Azam here, and he wanted to ask question. Mr. Azam, can you unmute your speaker? Then you can ask question.
Yeah, please do. I mean, unless you have a question, it looks like it becomes a monologue. A monologue is not what you do in a seminar kind of thing.
Is there Abu Ibrahim?
My question is about different methodologies like multidisciplinary research. When we have one methodology tested in one field, like in data analysis, we have one technique, GLM. You said it's tested in hydrology already, and reference is available. But if I want to apply this on the data of like you can say biostatistics, public health, blah blah, then the journal, if I apply, the journal will ask you have any references to this methodology in this field, new field. So I am confused here how I can satisfy them. I am a new user of this methodology in this new data set or new field.
It's a wonderful question. It's a wonderful question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, this is my question because I wrote a paper after I finished, and when I was on the phase to send them and submit, then I stuck here over here when they asked me to give us 5 referees. But in new field, many people are on this methodology available, but in new field, no one is available. So I stuck over here that if this my paper goes to any referee, he will not approve it because or he will say this methodology is not used in this field. So in this situation,
Okay, okay. Shall I respond or you have more questions?
yes sir, kindly tell and one more, because this was my first experience when I was publishing a few months ago. uh, that was about the referees and references, like uh, some methodology are being used by foreign uh, authors,
Uh-huh.
but when we work with our professors and we are used to and we want to send our paper to those people who are familiar or whom in this situation we think the foreigner will be more stricter about this, how we can overcome this
Okay,
type
shall
of.
I answer? Shall I respond to your question now? Okay, let me guess. You raised a very interesting point. I'm going to respond to that. You know, there is a particular methodology in time series. We have the time domain and frequency domain. There are two approaches, right? The frequency domain is basically the cyclical part, and that's used in business cycle analysis mostly. Now, people have now become smart. They can use it to find causality between. The limitation of the method is you can use only two variables. Now it's like
Yes,
more like looking for correlation. Now, what is the
yes,
problem? Sorry,
yes, I am listening.
you're listening. Okay, good. And this is a old as time series analysis itself is, but it was not very widely used. Physicists used to apply this methodology to many of their research they used to do. Medical scientists use this in many of their cases. And economists started using only in maybe last 20, maybe 20 years or so. And this is getting increasing popularity. Now, this is a very interesting, very good, powerful tool. It can capture not only the along the time domain, it can also find out causality and the frequencies. So you may
Okay sir.
not get any causality using a standard Granger causality method, but if you use this particular one, then you can capture other kinds of causality that has not been hitherto explored. Now, I have used that methodology in a few of my papers, and I have recently written one more on immigration. That's my very favorite topic. I myself an immigrant. So I have pretty much completed that. Now I have given to one of my professors for him to look at it. He said this is a very interesting methodology, but I am not very familiar with it. But it's okay. Not everybody is supposed to know everything, and he's looking into it now. I hope if we get a green signal, then we'll submit it. Probably we'll submit it to a pretty good journal, inshallah. And we'll see. And if you submit to a good journal, the challenge is even more mounting there. It's harder. The review process is extremely hard, and usually they go to very tough reviewers, and they are very inclined to reject more than accept. But we'll see. If not one journal, we'll submit another one. So that's not a problem either. So it happens. And then I'll refer to another particular methodology that was first written in 1960 by an author. It's called the rational expectation. You are familiar with that rational expectation, right? And this particular piece of research never drew much attraction or traction in the mind of other researchers. Only in the 1980s, this topic became a very vibrant issue. And it entered the mainstream in economics, particularly macroeconomics. And this guy, he got the Nobel Prize, Engel. He got Nobel Prize basically using this rational expectation process. You can see his tons of papers are on rational expectation basically. So many topics start beginning, and even if you go to even older things, in 1927, Working first identified the identification problem. And you probably are familiar. Identification problem is a problem in a simultaneous equation, right? And why we get to simultaneous equation? Because variables look like endogenous. We in our standard econometrics we assume y is endogenous, all x's are exogenous. But if x's affect y, in some cases y might affect x too. Like wage and hours worked. Okay, you think the hours worked depends on wage, but wage also determines hours worked. Income and consumption is endogenous. Consumption determines income, and income determines consumption. So in these cases, there's an endogeneity issue, in which case you end up with inconsistent results. And inconsistent means it is not unbiased even. So in the presence of inconsistency or endogeneity, no paper will go through unless you correct for the endogeneity issue. Usually people use ILS or indirect least square or 2SLS, right? But Working's paper was in 1927, and this was overlooked for a very long time. Only now we know that the idea of simultaneity must be addressed, and if you have a bunch of equations, all the equations must be identified. So strictly speaking, what is identification? Identification means if you have 5 structural equations in a system where investment is a function of interest, y income is a consumption is a function of income, and you take all other equations and then have a model like in a form of matrix. So when the equations are identified, then the number of reduced forms and number of structural forms will match. That means each structural form will give one reduced form, and from the reduced form we can go back to the structural equation, and from the structural equation you can find the reduced form. And this has become a very important issue when you are dealing with simultaneous equations. And if you have read the book of Carl Christ, who is a professor at Johns Hopkins, I met him only once. He's like a 7-foot tall guy. His name of his book is Econometric Methods and Models and Methods. The first chapter of the book is identification, and he argues that identification is prior to estimation, which is true. I mean, if the equations are not identified, why would you estimate it in the first place? It doesn't make sense because you don't know the equation you are identifying, which one is a demand function, which is a supply function. Actually, this is what the Working's paper was. How do you know? Because quantity is a function of price in both demand and both supply. And when you estimate it, how do you know it is demand or supply? But anyway, I don't want to go too much into that. So your point is that sometimes we stumble on because we don't get a reference. Yeah, if journal 1 doesn't have reference for your work, just go to journal 2. And you look at the journal's referees and see they are not referee. You will not ever know the name of the referees, but you will know the editorial board and the associate editors who actually get the paper once you submit a particular one, and then he knows the whole bunch of the referees. And the referees, one of them, familiar with the topic, will get it and he will review it and submit it. But if you're lucky, it will go to a good referee. But if you're unlucky, it will go to one of the stupid referees who even doesn't know what it is, and then in that case he will reject it without really knowing what he's doing. I mean, this happens. This is not a fictitious story I'm telling you. This is not a cooked up story. This is a fact. Anyway, so your problem is not unique. This is a pretty general, broad problem. Many people suffer from this. Many people do. So good journals have excellent associate editors and they have excellent reviewers also. And they are well informed. And that's why they send to 3 or 4 people. And if that is the case, obviously then you will have to assume that they have the right kind of referees. And therefore your paper will receive fair justice in their hands. But thank you for the question. Anybody else has a question?
Yes. Dear Azam, your mic is unmute. Now you can ask question.
Yes,
Yeah, please
yes,
feel
thank
free.
you. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yes, my name is Dr. Azam, and I have done my MPhil from PIDE in economics. I am a little bit new researcher in this field of economics, but when I dig, I might basically face 2 kind of problem. One is that the paper must have some extensive quantitative analysis, and other school of thought which I review different papers in most of times, they have strong focus on conceptual and theoretical backgrounds. So what you think that the paper should be a quantifiable area of research is quite important, or review type or descriptive type paper is quite important. So what you suggest to us?
Well, you never want to get into a situation where it's a misfit, okay? You don't want to submit a paper on sports to a journal where they will not even consider it. So this is a decision that you have to make. Look at the editorial board and look at the background of the associate editors, because they actually look at the papers, because they come from all fields, all subfields of economics.
Yes, yes.
And see who is where. Like I have a friend who is a finance professor, and he used to do regular finance research, but his focus has now shifted from general finance to Islamic finance. And he's a very nice guy. And whenever he reviews papers, he generally takes a very favorable look at the paper, and he generally tries to help people publish it. So referee never knows who wrote it. Sometimes, the editorial office mistakenly sent the whole paper to him and the name and everything is there. That's wrong. That should not be the case. But if you're lucky, you might get a sympathetic referee like him. He will give you suggestions, say, address these issues. I also actually do the same thing. I don't want to put people in a difficult spot, giving them extremely hard issues that is hard to address. And nobody should do that. I mean, all papers have limitations. There is no paper that is perfect. Therefore, you must recognize your limitation when you review others' case. And often we don't do that. That's inappropriate behavior on the part of a reviewer. That's what I think. So you find out if you have a fit. If they cannot find a reviewer for your paper, they'll return it to you saying that this is a very unconventional paper for our journal. We couldn't identify a reviewer for your paper. We tried hard. So please look at other outlets. Sometimes they would send it that kind of response. Yeah, they do. I mean, if you do work on the subcontinent countries, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, many people even don't know about the countries at all. I mean, Americans are very smart. Well, you have to really talk to many of them to verify what you said or what you thought. Many people don't know where Bangladesh is, where Pakistan is. They know there are 2 countries. They heard it. That's it. That's the end of the story. And if the paper on Bangladesh or Pakistan economic analysis goes to them, what do you expect them to know? They will read probably from the Wikipedia and then find out what it is, where it is. And Wikipedia's work is not really any in-depth stuff. And so hurriedly they will write a review which probably would be very unfair to the author. It happens. It does happen. And like I said, no, I always try to see that the guy can get through it. Actually, there was a paper that was really not at all a good paper. But I told him to do this, and he didn't do anything. He just addressed one point probably and returned it to me. I had to reject it at that point. But if you publish any paper in a journal, the journal's name will go down the drain. And the journal's status would be questioned. Independence and its status as a good paper journal would be questioned by other scholars. They say, don't submit there. This is a bad place to submit. Like Economic Model is a good journal. A journal of policy modeling is a very good journal. They do not go for too much of mathematics, but more like policy. So, I mean, if we are to publish a paper in QJE, for example, it must be very rich in methodology, data, and analysis of the data itself. That's why they are so top journals. Or even papers like in JP, Journal of Political Economy, same case, same situation. AER, American Economic Review, will not consider a paper unless it has something very interesting. But here, the folks that write there, the folks that write in QJ, JP, and all those, they are not Tom, Dicks, and Harriets. They are some of the best minds in the field. That's a judgment you have to make, which journal you send. Don't be frustrated if something got rejected. And as a reviewer, they're never supposed to write very bad things, that can hurt people's emotions. You have to write very balanced report, not hurting him. Say this is missing this, and in the analysis of the topic he picked up, these things should have bearing on the analytical framework, but is missing clearly. So in light of this, it's hard to accept this paper. But I'd probably say if the editor wants, he can send it for revise or resubmit, but that's his choice. Does it make sense what I said? Did I answer your question? Did I?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
No. Publishing is a game.
Yes.
It's really a risky game. But that should not deter you from being bold and continue to move forward and keep submitting and submitting and submitting. Submit.
But we have.
Sorry?
Yes, I have a question that we have two review here, like in third world countries. We normally like our supervisors, and they have strong focus on our quantitative analysis. Even after doing our PhD, we have just viewpoint in our mind that the paper must have some fascinating type of techniques, and based on those techniques, we can really win the paper, or we can really get our paper published too. But the other stance, when I see different theoretical papers, they have extensive, they have minimal quantitative analysis too. They are writing review type articles, and they are writing the descriptive type papers and such kind of stuff they are publishing in different journals. So what do you think? Is it a balanced approach that we have quantitative papers as well, or we should focus for our future to theoretical side?
I think this is a very important question. Now, if you are a heavyweight, like what is the name of this guy? Jagadish Bhagavati.
Yeah.
He wrote a paper in AER. I think it was 19. No, I think I forgot the year. This is on openness and trade. That was the lead article in the journal.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't have an element of mathematics in it. Not a single word of mathematics. But it got through. Because Bhagavat is a heavyweight, right? Jagdish. He's known to be one of the best trade theorists. And it's hard to reject his paper. But he raised some very valid and very important points. I think it's a 5 or 6 page paper. Even Stiglitz writes paper on globalization and other issues. Often they have very little reference to data or only few data points they talk about. And no math, but he's a brilliant mathematician. You read his writing, he writes so well. Oh boy, he's another professor of Columbia. He's a Nobel laureate. So it is not a question of how much quant analysis you put. If the quant analysis does not fit the nature of the paper, this is a disaster. Disaster. It will never get published, no matter what model you put. Actually, I received some papers. A model is there, but what he has done has no significant relevance to the model itself. Model looks very elegant, but rest of it doesn't quite match what is there. The two must converge. Theory and the analysis must converge, and in between is the econometric model. The model must fit what is there in the model, in the theory. So this is how we link the theory.
I give you an yes, sir.
Sorry.
I give you an example.
Please.
Sorry, I'm taking you a little time more.
Okay.
Like in this COVID issues, data doesn't have a continuous data as well.
Yeah.
I was working with one of collaborator from USA and from Yale University.
Can you be a bit louder, please? Slightly louder.
Yes. I was writing paper on COVID and tourism sector, developing nexus between these two.
Okay.
But it was hard for me to find a continuous data on
COVID issues.
That.
You know that.
Yes. So he said that you should focus the descriptive type papers, and I quite become hesitant that how can I write these descriptive ones without such COVID data. That was quite a tough stuff for researchers, I think so.
Okay. In this case, there is a paper. I think it is a what's that one called? NBER paper. NBER paper wrote a very nice paper. If you look at it, you will see he doesn't use a lot of data in it. Actually, there are some Indians that published in Journal of Public Affairs. They use some short length data, daily data or weekly data. I think that it was published immediately after this COVID thing happened, probably by June or July. So maybe 4 or 5 months data they had. And wrote paper, it got published because there is no reference paper to use. So that those papers became the reference papers. It happens. This kind of extreme economic crisis situation, if there is no data, you can still do. You can look at the newspaper and other kinds of, this is like called clippings from other information. Data is not necessarily numbers. It can be an information. And there are approaches that you can use information in your model. This is called, what is that called? There's an approach to that. I forgot the name of it. Let me see if I remember, I'll tell you right now. If you look at JPA, Journal of Public Affairs, look at last 3-4 issues. You will find some papers right on COVID. There's one guy from India. He wrote a paper on forecasting this. How can you forecast anything using maybe 4 or 5 months data? Or actually, I think he used daily data. But, daily data is subject to seasonal fluctuation, right? And if you don't bring in seasonality into it, how do you then analyze the data? Those are serious methodological questions. But given that there is really no data to work with, you have to do whatever you have. Newspaper reports and things like that. Yeah. If you're lucky, it will go through, depending on how you present your case. Okay, Azam?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
You, sir. I mean, write it, but again, they will see how you have presented your case. Is your presentation, or does the presentation warrant further readership, attention? because there will be readers on this only if your paper is readable. I'm not saying your paper is not readable, don't get me wrong. This is for the reader to judge how you presented your case. Like I said, if you look at the top journal paper, you will see it is so well written. You enjoy reading it. You really enjoy reading it. Beautiful introduction. Like Borjas on labor economics. His writing is so smooth. He's basically not even an original American guy. He is from Cuba. But he has amazing writing ability. Even from the Chinese people, they write very well because they have mastered the art of writing. Extremely good writing, extremely good. And they are actually going to dominate the literature in the years ahead. So never be nervous, never be upset about whatever, but just pursue your thoughts and keep writing. But read it, give it to somebody else and see, can you give me a comment on that? Maybe one of your professors can read it and help you. I mean, I have had many students, actually, the PhD research I review, I usually tell them, this is not the way you write. So I probably edit some of the paragraphs, some of the pages and say, follow this methodology, how to write it. Of course, he may not accept or he accept, that's for him. But I tell him that the way it is presented doesn't really make a lot of appeal to the reader. But it's for them to decide. But this is a problem with all the people coming from that part of the world. Even the Chinese are writing so well.
Rahman, she wanted to ask a question.
Who?
There is a participant, Hania Rahman, wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I saw his name here.
Hello, am I clearly audible to you?
Okay, please raise it.
Hello, am I audible to you?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
All right, I want to ask that, firstly, I want to inform that I had written a paper and I'd submitted in a journal in July 2020. And the journal took a lot of time in reviewing the paper. And even right now, the status of the paper is still in review process. So I want to ask that what should we do if the paper got stuck like this, that the journal has not accepted it and not rejected it and is in review process for such a long time?
It is.
So yes. So what should be the way forward?
Yes, the way forward is you cannot submit it to another journal until you have a decision from here. Or of course you can withdraw. But it happens. You are not a unique case. I know you are not a standalone case. There are many cases that happens like that. After 2-3 years, you haven't heard anything. So you write them a letter saying that I did this, and not hearing from any news from you about acceptance or rejection, I have decided I will withdraw it. Please consider this letter as my formal request to withdraw the paper from you, so that I can submit it to other journals. That's it. That remains and it becomes a record for you. You send email. Okay. But after 1.5 years, and now you submit to another paper and journal, and that will take some time. And then they will say the data has become outdated. And then, this is a big problem. So what journal did you send it to? Yeah, Mr. Rahman?
I sent it to, yes, I sent it to Sage Publications, Sage 1 publication.
Okay. What's the name of the journal?
I'm not really sure about the name of the journal, but I had submitted in Sage Publications.
Sage, I know Sage.
Yes, exactly, Sage.
SAGE, yeah.
Yes, SAGE, yes, exactly. Yep. Yep, and it was a pleasure hearing you, because I'm also from finance, and I want to ask you that like I want to have a suggestion from you. Basically, I am a beginner in research, having a lot of curiosity in research and writing as well. I love to write, and I have a lot of curiosity for research. What would be your suggestion for beginner researchers like us who want to do some mark who want to make a mark in the field of research? Suggestion for us, like sharing with expert researchers, or papers in top journals, and but particularly in respect to finance, because you're also from finance. What would you recommend or suggest to young fresh finance researchers, that how can we refine our research skills and make our progress in this field?
You see, I think you pointed to a solution. A collaboration is a good idea. And remember, one brain, two brains are always better than one brain, right? Always. So any of the shortcomings, when you write something, you do your best. So we call it, in microeconomics, we call it reflexivity, which is basically X is as good as X. So what you wrote, you will not be able to think it is a garbage or it's a bad paper because you wrote it. How can it be bad, right? Because you did your best. So you have to show it to somebody else. Now, if it's a lot of work, others will try not to really get into it because it's a lot of time reviewing somebody's paper. So offer them a kind of a collaboration and see that if that would work. And see, and if you read their revision, and you can make your judgment whether he did a good job or not, whether you can depend. That makes sense what I'm saying? Because you need to learn how to write, just like I need to read how to do this, how to do that. We always have deficiencies. So when you say collaboration, I call it research complementarity. What you don't have, you get it from somebody else. Together it becomes one paper, right? This complementarity often improves the paper a lot.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I got your point. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, we have a participant. I think Hussain Salim. Hussain Salim, can you ask question? Hussain
Salim. I saw the name here. Hussain Salim. Yeah, okay. I see his name here. Yeah, Dr. Salim, go ahead. Yes, I'm here.
Sir, I'm just acknowledging this session. You have given us a lot of information and very valid points. So thank you to you and your team. So it is very much informative about data and about journal recognition, journal submission of paper, etc. Thank you very much, sir.
No, thank you. I mean, the whole object of this thing that Imran organized was to exchange views and ideas. And I thought that would be a good idea to share my thoughts about how I cross the hoops. You have lifelong, you encounter hoops. Often you cross some of them, times you don't. But that should not frustrate. That's the name of this game. The publishing game is pretty dangerous and dirty game.
Yeah, sir, this is very much pleasure that we are learning from the most experienced people like you.
You are very welcome. I'll be of any help that you might seek, okay?
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
So I think we have answered the questions of all concerned participants. So I would love to conclude this session. I really thankful for your time, and we enjoyed and we learned a lot of things from you, and hopefully
it's my honor. It's my pleasure. I have been through the same path you are talking about. I stumbled at the beginning.
Yep. So thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Hey,
next time.
Thank you all. And I send my best regards and salam to all of you. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. God bless you. Take care.
God bless all of us. Inshallah.